racing against the light, you know.
I'm a Montrealer. I'd lose votes if I didn't.
There's RCMP officers here.
They have to stick with me.
This is a great idea, this walking outside of Montreal.
Yeah.
Genius.
No, come on.
Do you have moments where you wake up and you think, I just want to hang out with the kids today?
Yeah, pretty much every morning. But we do a pretty good job of making time for the kids on many weekends, hoping for the ice to freeze so we can get out on the lake. Just times where I remember what life's all about and why I'm doing the rest of it is to try and build a better world for them, and spending time with them is part and parcel of that.
Does that remind you of how any sentiments you had? Like, do you remember
little bit.
feeling that a little bit?
A lot of.
I mean, you had mostly just your dad, right?
But it was a lot of what I'm trying to do is articulate to them in a way that my father never did.
Sure.
What they're going through, because he hadn't gone through it, but I have gone through it, and I can sort of relate to them on that and try and give my kids the tools to, to appreciate the positive sides of this life and handle the negative sides.
Just need a minute to adjust the camera. I'm going to start with where you were around this time last week at the G20 and the signing of the new NAFTA. I know you might argue that tariffs and a trade deal are not the same thing, that they're two separate things, but it seems to me that you had some leverage there with the United States and you won't get it again. So why did you sign it even with those tariffs still in place?
Well, I think first of all, investors and businesses are extremely happy that we have settled the question of NAFTA. The question of leverage is one to reflect on. I mean, we obviously want to get rid of those steel and aluminum tariffs. We need to. We're going to continue to stand up for our workers. But we also see the path towards ratification as a place where there are continued conversations from members of Congress, from business associations in the United States, from governors who also want to see these tariffs gone, and we're going to keep working on that.
So that's the leverage then, trying to press on people around him or people in Washington?
Every step of the way, there continue to be levers to pull on, and we're going to continue to do what Canadians expect us to do, which is look at every opportunity to stand up for our interests.
You have said that the president is unpredictable. You've said that he doesn't play by the rules. Can you give me an example of how that has affected your job as Prime Minister, having someone who is so unpredictable?
Well, I think as Canadians have seen, we've continued to stay constructive in our relationship with the United States. It means that we certainly don't react or overreact when we get a surprise in a tweet or a statement. We continue to say, look, the relationship is bigger than that between any two individuals at the heads of the country.
Has it gotten easier with the president?
Yes, there's a little more understanding of what our personalities are and how we can work together.
But you're not going to hang out with them.
Canadians expect me to be professional around this, and I will continue to.
I want to move to another thing that happened at the G20. When you took some time to meet with the Saudi prince, the Saudi crown prince, MBS, you raised the issue of Raif Badawi, his sister, Jamal Khashoggi, and the war in Yemen. How does a leader respond to another leader coming up to him and saying, listen, we have some problems here? How does he respond to that?
Well, I think that very much depends on the way things are phrased. And my frame in all cases on the world stage is Canada wants to be helpful in moving us towards a better place as a planet. It's never a situation of imagining that we can stand there and tell another country what to do or how to do it. It's saying, look, it would be great if you were to do this, and we could be helpful in moving forward in a constructive way.
How do you say to the Crown Prince, we're pretty sure you were involved in the killing of an innocent journalist?
Oh, we say we need better answers on that. We need better accountability. The killing of a journalist is something that is extremely serious to Canadians, to me,
and his
to
response
citizens.
to you saying that, with you knowing full well what you know about the intelligence behind it?
His response is, look, we're happy to continue to work and get more information and more proof. And if you have proof or information, continue to provide it. So that's exactly what
and
we're doing.
do you roll your eyes at that point?
being a leader on the world stage involves having an ability to engage with all types of people without letting personal feelings overtake one's involuntary movements.
Have you heard the tape, or have you been briefed on what that
tape is? I have
been
briefed on what the tape is.
And what was that like?
Obviously, it's something that intelligence communities have taken and listened to and worked with, and is part of our reflection on getting real answers.
But could you characterize it for me?
I'm not going to characterize that.
Horrific?
I'm not going to characterize it.
You said you also made it clear to the Crown Prince that Canada stands up for human rights. How can you say that to him, knowing that we are still selling those light armored vehicles? Is there not a contradiction in that?
This is a question that comes up not just in regards to Saudi Arabia, but in regards to a broad array of countries that have different levels of defense of human rights than Canadians have and Canadians expect. We try to look for constructive ways to have relationships that lead us to being able to be very frank on human rights, while at the same time look for a way where you're not, sort of shaking your fist at someone and saying you've got to change, in an expectation that alone will have them change.
Is the contract impossible to break?
There are reflections ongoing around that.
So just so I'm clear, though, the contract could be broken. It's possible.
As I highlighted, the contract has particular provisions both for confidentiality and around significant penalties in the billions of dollars. And it was a contract that was signed by the previous government, and we are looking at it, obviously.
You've got 4 provinces who have not complied with the carbon tax. Now you're imposing it on them. Is it harder to sell the carbon tax when you have premiers saying that it is the wrong thing to do?
I think the fact that there are a bunch of conservatives out there who have decided that pollution should be free is not that difficult to counter. We're putting a price on pollution because we want less pollution, and the fact that conservatives in this country don't want to move forward on either fighting climate change or helping people ensure that we can get the good jobs in the future is a conversation I'm willing to have anytime. What we're doing with the Climate Action Incentive is making sure that a family that will have extra costs because of putting a price on pollution will be more than equivalently compensated for it.
And what is your hope in terms of how those people change their behavior? And do you have a sense of how quickly that would happen?
Well, I think we know that when you put a price on something you don't want, like pollution, well, we're putting a price on pollution, right?
It's a tax, but okay.
We're making sure, well, actually, the money is going straight back to the jurisdiction. This isn't going into federal coffers. This isn't something we're going to spend on something else. We're actually giving that money back to citizens in the province in which it was raised, because we know that if you make pollution free, people are going to give out more of it. We say no. If you want to pollute, there should be a cost associated.
We saw I think he's a political ally of yours, Emmanuel Macron, face this very question over the past couple of weeks. He put a surtax on fuel, riots in the street, and he had to back down. What lesson did you learn from watching that?
Well, he didn't ensure that the second part of it, you put a price on pollution because we want less pollution, but you also make sure that ordinary Canadians are going to be able to afford this transition towards a lower carbon economy.
So it's the rebate that makes the difference.
The rebate, the support for families, and making sure that we are supporting families through this transition time is a fundamental responsibility for every government.
And yet, the United Nations says that most of the large emitting countries, including Canada, are not on track to meet Paris targets. They are calling for more urgency. So how do you respond in the face of that? Do you speed up what you're doing? Do you change what you're doing?
Actually, a lot of countries around the world are looking with a lot of interest at how Canada is moving forward on putting a price on pollution and supporting ordinary citizens through this transition. It is a model that is going to set us on a path to reach our Paris targets. We are going to be able to
the UN says no. The UN says it's not going to happen.
We are going to be able to reach those commitments.
How?
By having a price on pollution, people will look for ways to innovate to pollute less that will effectively reduce our climate change emissions and improve outcomes.
So you will reach the Paris?
We're going to reach our Paris targets, yes.
Okay. The Alberta Premier announced a reduction on oil production to deal with these historic low prices in Alberta. She's also buying rail cars to try and find more ways out. What have you offered to her? What can you do for the tens of thousands of people laid off in that sector now? Is there anything you can do?
We are absolutely looking at the tools we have around EI. We're looking at the tools we have around income support. And I'm also willing, of course, to sit down with Premier Notley and hear about how the federal government can be a partner in solving this.
But she's told you she wanted you to buy rail cars, for instance.
That's something we're happy to look at. If that's a proposal that she thinks is going to make a significant difference, then we're happy to look at how it works. I mean, we're there to be a partner to help.
When GM announced its future shutdown of the Oshawa auto plant, you said you're going to help to get those workers back on their feet. So what would you say to those people who are, concerned that their jobs are sort of evolving away? That the jobs are not maybe the jobs of the future, well, and so, what could you do for them?
It is a devastating piece of news that GM has put forward, and we're continuing to work both with GM and with folks to try and see if there isn't a path forward, whether it's new technologies that are coming in or improvements on old technologies, and that focus is something we're continuing to invest in, and that's why our investments in skills, in university, in STEM research, in bringing women into the workforce, these are the kinds of things that we're trying to help Canadians in that transition.
I get that. So then why don't you just say to them, take that giant plant you have and make cars of the future? Why won't they consider?
That's part of the conversation ongoing. Obviously, the President Trump and I had commiserated about this. So there are real questions about what we can do to try and make sure that we're giving every possible support to those workers.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Did that trip to India do more harm than good?
There is a number of things that came out that were very positive about that trip in terms of investments, in terms of jobs. But yeah, if I had to redo that trip, I would do it very differently.
Would you wear the outfits?
No, I probably would not. I think that was a clear. I mean, I had more suits on that trip than I had outfits, but the pictures of the outfits dominated, and certainly it was a lesson learned.
And the whole attempted murderer showing up at a dinner. I know the report has come out, and you're not willing to say much about what was redacted, but it seems to me you at least have a lesson here about how you do these things.
Absolutely. On every trip there are lessons to learn, ways to improve how we do things. I mean, one of the lessons on this is just how important it is that we have a National Security Committee of Parliamentarians that actually come together, all parties together, and weigh in on these issues.
You've said that Canadians should expect the next election to be the nastiest yet. Okay. What are you going to do to prevent that?
I'm going to continue to demonstrate that positive politics that bring people together, that not engaging in personal attacks. Canadians deserve better than politicians who play the fear and division card every time they can.
Do you practice what you preach?
I certainly try to, yeah.
You try to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you admit that there are times when you don't?
I will admit that I have occasion to be critical in ways. I always look for ways to be very fierce about distinctions in policy and calling out the politics of division and fear whenever I see it. The Conservatives are terribly upset that I referred to them as practicing ambulance-chasing politics, but if they're upset, it's probably because it stings a bit.
So you promised Colonel Justice. Will you follow through on that?
I'm thinking back to a moment at the beginning of October when we were talking about the Terry Lynn McClintock issue with the Healing Lodge, and inside the House of Commons you called the Conservatives ambulance-chasing politicians, and it wasn't just in the heat of the moment, because then you came right back out and you said it again. How do you feel about that comment now? Does it reflect who you are as a politician?
I think it does, because I won't make any apologies for calling out people who use the basest kinds of politics and fears to torque a situation.
You've changed the policy subsequent to that.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
But they didn't recognize that they had done exactly the same thing 14 times while they were in office. And the fact that Terry Lynn McClintock was transferred to a medium security institution under the Conservative government, and she remained in a medium security institution throughout the time that they were criticizing me, showed that they were willing to exploit a horrific tragedy to a family, to a little girl, to try and score cheap political
Or they were trying to
points.
call attention to an issue that needed to be changed that you subsequently changed.
That was a change that they very much could have made if they were so outraged about it while they were busy doing it. I will not apologize for calling out the politics of cynicism, of fear, of division, of anger, of hatred.
Yeah, but that's not what you did. That's not what you did. You called them a name back. Ambulance chasing politicians. I wonder whether you think you should have said something different now.
I think it's extremely important to point out when people are playing the basest kinds of politics. Their decision to move forward and to make this an issue on the back of a terrible tragedy was something that was
But you changed the policy. It worked. And in that way, the opposition was doing its job. Whether you like the language they used is beside the point.
I think there's two things. First of all, yes, it is an opposition's job and responsibility to challenge, to call out, to say you should do things differently, you can do things differently. That's really important. But if they do it by exacerbating the polarization, the anger, the fear within an electorate, we start to walk down a very, very dangerous path. And I am always going to be very firm and unequivocal about calling out nastiness and negativity to that level in politics.
Have you learned anything about your temperament in this job? I have some observations, but I'll let you go first.
I am extremely passionate about standing up for what I believe to be the truth and believe in my values. And I get offended when people rely on falsehoods, and I get irritated when people try and play fast and loose with facts or ignore facts entirely. I think that is weakening not just to our governance, but to our institutions and to our democracy.
You're scrappy.
I can be, yeah. I'm not going to, sit by meekly as people weaken our institutions and our democracy.
And what is the difference between being scrappy and being full of sunny ways? Can you be scrappy and still positive?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I can, and I think I do. I mean, I always look for ways to bring people together, but I'm always going to be ready to argue a given point.
I was in New York last week, and I wandered into a store, and there was cups with your name on it, and socks, and all sorts of things. Do you ever worry that brand Trudeau sort of overtakes what you're trying to say and do, which I think to you is more important?
I think what we're seeing around interest in Canada on the world stage doesn't have as much to do with me as it does to do with what Canadians have been doing on the world stage for years and for generations.
It's your face attached to it. It's not the flag, or it's not anybody else.
There's a mix of things associated with it, and if we can do a better job of highlighting what Canada is doing on the world stage and what we're doing at home with things like the Canada Child Benefit that's making such a big difference, then people will look and say, okay, they've got a solution to some of the really sticky problems that we're facing all around the world.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you.